The crystal chandeliers of Manhattan's most exclusive cathedral cast golden light across pews filled with society's elite as tech mogul Richard Whitmore prepares to marry socialite Victoria Hamilton. Their union representing merger of old money and new power that tabloids celebrate while ignoring the cruelty behind today's guest list. Among gilded invitations sent to influence pedophiles and inherited aristocrats sits one meant as final insult, addressed to his black ex-wife Amara Johnson, whom he abandoned 3 years ago when her medical practice struggled and his racist family demanded he choose between their approval and his marriage to a woman whose brilliance threatened their comfortable assumptions about superiority that skin color supposedly determined. Outside, a midnight blue Rolls-Royce Phantom glides through Manhattan traffic, carrying Amara and her 3-year-old triplets toward confrontation that will expose Richard's cruelty while revealing her transformation from abandoned wife into self-made millionaire whose success story will humble every guest who assumed poverty would be her permanent condition after divorce that was meant to destroy her, but instead forge strength that adversity creates when character meets opportunity through resilience that privilege never develops, because comfort never tests determination that struggle demands when survival becomes the foundation for triumph. Victoria, darling, are you absolutely certain we should have invited her? Richard's mother, Eleanor Whitmore, adjusts her pearl necklace with nervous fingers as she surveys the cathedral where Manhattan's elite gather for what society magazines have dubbed the wedding of the decade. It was Richard's idea, Mother Whitmore, Victoria responds coolly, her voice carrying satisfaction of someone who has never faced genuine adversity but takes pleasure in others' assumed suffering. I want Amara to see what she lost when she refused to fit into our world, Richard declares, straightening his custom Armani tuxedo with arrogance that 3 years of telling himself comfortable lies about his divorce has cultivated into absolute conviction about his own righteousness. But what if she doesn't come? What if she's too embarrassed about her circumstances? Eleanor frets, her concern focused not on kindness, but on ensuring that planned humiliation actually occurs to satisfy revenge that privilege demands when challenged by competence. Oh, she'll come, Richard assures with cruel certainty. Her pride won't let her admit defeat by avoiding this. She'll show up looking exactly as pathetic as we expect, and everyone will see why I had to make the choice I made. The conversation takes place in Cathedral's ornate vestry, where bride and groom prepare for ceremony that represents triumph over obstacles that money had eliminated: Amara's presence, her inconvenient intelligence, her refusal to disappear quietly after divorce that was designed to erase her from their social circle permanently. I still can't believe you were actually married to a black woman, Victoria comments with distaste that finishing school had taught her to express through subtle facial expressions rather than crude language that breeding prohibited despite sentiment that upbringing had embedded. It was a phase, Richard dismisses casually, his words rewriting history to cast 3-year marriage as temporary lapse in judgment rather than authentic relationship that had provided happiness before family pressure destroyed what love had built between souls who connected despite racial barriers that society maintained. A very expensive phase, Eleanor adds pointedly, referring to divorce settlement that Richard had minimized through legal maneuvering that left Amara with minimal assets despite her contributions to household income during years when her medical practice had thrived before their marriage ended. The important thing is that it's behind us now, Richard states firmly, his voice carrying conviction that comes from repeating comfortable lies until they feel like truth to conscience that had been gradually silenced through rationalization that privilege enables when moral compromise becomes habit rather than exception. And today, everyone will see the difference between appropriate choices and whatever that was, Victoria adds, her tone suggesting that Richard's previous marriage had been aberration that proper breeding should have prevented if character had matched social position that genetics supposedly guaranteed. Exactly. When Amara walks into this cathedral wearing whatever she could afford from discount stores, sitting alone because she has no one significant in her life, everyone will understand why our families insisted on this correction. Richard explains, his scenario based on assumptions about her current circumstances that comfortable prejudice had constructed without actual knowledge. I almost feel sorry for her. Eleanor lies unconvincingly, her sympathy as artificial as her social smile that accompanied decades of charitable work designed more for tax benefits than genuine concern for suffering that donations could address without requiring personal involvement. Don't waste your pity, mother. She made her choices when she refused to understand that some boundaries exist for good reasons. Richard responds, his justification revealing worldview that sees social hierarchies as natural law rather than artificial constructions that power maintains through systematic exclusion of people whose presence challenges comfortable assumptions. Well, I suppose today's ceremony will provide closure for everyone involved. Victoria concludes with satisfaction that comes from believing justice consists of people accepting their designated places in social order, that breeding determines rather than achievement, earning through merit, that effort demonstrates despite obstacles that prejudice creates. After today, no one will question why I chose family loyalty over individual desires, Richard declares, his words revealing how he has reframed abandonment of wife as noble sacrifice for clan rather than moral failure that cowardice produced when tested by circumstances that revealed character beneath social position. The cathedral doors open to admit early guests, their designer clothing and inherited jewelry, creating atmosphere of exclusivity that money can purchase, but character must earn through choices that reveal whether privilege serves wisdom or just accumulating advantages that birth provides without requiring development of qualities that adversity teaches when comfort never tests determination. Remember, darling, when she arrives, we respond with polite sympathy rather than obvious satisfaction. Victoria instructs, her strategy designed to maximize humiliation while maintaining plausible deniability about cruelty that witnesses might recognize if masks slip to reveal authentic emotions that breeding supposedly refined but actually concealed. The cathedral fills with Manhattan's elite, their conversations creating buzz of anticipation that society events generate when power gathers to celebrate itself through rituals that reinforce hierarchies while excluding those whose presence might challenge comfortable assumptions about merit, worth, and the relationship between inheritance and achievement that privilege prefers not examining too closely when advantage depends on maintaining myths about natural superiority. I heard she lost her medical practice after the divorce, whispers Constance Pemberton, her voice carrying gossip that feeds social gatherings where others' misfortunes provide entertainment for people whose lives lack sufficient drama to sustain interest without borrowing tragedy from acquaintances whose circumstances provide cautionary tales about stepping outside designated boundaries. Financial ruin, for what I understand, responds Margaret Astor, her tone mixing false sympathy with genuine satisfaction that comes from witnessing consequences that confirm worldview about appropriate behavior and proper associations that breeding should guide when social position demands loyalty to class rather than individual relationships that cross lines. Richard made the right choice, declares Harrison Rockwell III, his pronouncement carrying authority that inherited wealth provides when speaking about situations that money has never required him to navigate personally, but that observation from comfort zone makes him expert on despite lack of experience with actual hardship. Absolutely. Family considerations must outweigh personal preferences when social stability depends on maintaining standards, agrees Patricia Vanderbilt, her philosophy revealing approach to relationships that treats love as luxury that privilege can afford to abandon when convenience suggests alternatives that comfort prefers over complications that genuine partnership creates. The assembled guests represent consolidation of old money and new wealth, their union in supporting Richard's choice, reflecting solidarity that power maintains when individual members face challenges to authority that collective response can neutralize through social pressure that isolation makes unbearable for people whose identity depends on acceptance from groups that exclusion defines as much as inclusion. Where do you suppose she's living now? Victoria asks her maid of honor, curiosity about Amara's circumstances, revealing desire for confirmation that divorce had achieved intended result of reducing former rival to circumstances that victory would require if justice were to be served according to social hierarchy. Probably some tiny apartment in Queens, struggling to make ends meet with whatever part-time work she can find, speculates Caroline Whitney. Her scenario constructed from comfortable prejudices about what happens to people who challenge social boundaries rather than actual knowledge about Amara's current situation. I hope she's learned her lesson about reaching above her station. Eleanor comments from her front row seat, her words revealing belief that marriage had been an attempt at social climbing rather than authentic relationship based on mutual attraction and shared values that love creates when hearts connect despite barriers. The invitation was masterful psychology. Richard compliments Judge Thorne Blackwood, his approval reflecting appreciation for strategy that demonstrates power while providing lesson for anyone else who might consider challenging social boundaries that wealth maintains through systematic exclusion of people whose presence threatens comfortable arrangements. Sometimes kindness requires teaching difficult lessons, Richard responds, his rationalization transforming cruelty into virtue through mental gymnastics that privilege enables when conscience requires management rather than elimination, because some moral sense remains despite systematic desensitization that social position facilitates when consequences rarely touch decision-makers personally. She'll understand eventually that this outcome was inevitable. Victoria adds with certainty that comes from never having experienced rejection, abandonment, or systematic discrimination that might teach humility about human resilience and the capacity for growth that adversity develops when character meets challenge through determination that comfort never requires developing. I wonder if she'll bring anyone with her, muses Eleanor, her speculation revealing hope that isolation would complete humiliation by demonstrating how thoroughly divorce had severed Amara's connections to social networks that support recovery from setbacks that community can address when belonging provides foundation for rebuilding what destruction attempts to eliminate permanently. Doubtful. Who would want to associate with someone whose life fell apart so completely? Responds Margaret, her assumption based on comfortable prejudice about how social networks function rather than understanding about authentic relationships that character creates when substance matters more than status and connections that serve souls rather than just advancing position. The cathedral's massive organ begins playing processional music, its notes creating anticipation that ceremony approaches while guests settle into assigned seats that reflect social hierarchies with military precision. Family in front rows, business associates in prominent positions, society figures arranged according to influence that money measures, but character transcends when authentic worth gets recognized despite economic circumstances that temporary conditions create. Remember, everyone, when she arrives we respond with appropriate sympathy. Richard instructs his immediate family, his directions revealing plan to maximize psychological impact while maintaining appearance of charitable concern that witnesses would observe rather than obvious cruelty that recognition might condemn. Of course, darling, we're not monsters, Victoria replies with irony that she doesn't recognize, her self-perception as decent person remaining intact despite participation in systematic humiliation that decent people would refuse enabling when empathy guides response rather than just social positioning. Here comes the moment of truth, whispers Caroline as cathedral doors remain closed, their anticipation building toward confrontation that they expect will provide entertainment, while confirming worldview about consequences that await people who challenge social boundaries that tradition maintains through enforcement that makes examples of those who dare to dream beyond designated limitations. The cathedral doors swing open with timing that suggests divine intervention rather than coincidence. Afternoon sunlight streaming through entrance to silhouette figure whose presence transforms anticipated humiliation into moment of reckoning that privilege had not prepared for when comfortable assumptions about power meet reality that character creates through choices that reveal strength instead of weakness. "Oh my God," whispers someone from the back pews as Rolls-Royce Phantom glides to stop outside cathedral steps, Its midnight blue perfection creating cognitive dissonance among guests whose expectations about Amara's circumstances had not included luxury transportation that wealth provides when success serves justice rather than just accumulating advantages. That can't be her car, Eleanor states with certainty that denial provides when reality refuses to conform to comfortable prejudices about consequences that should follow divorce designed to destroy rather than liberate woman, whose potential had threatened social order that male dominance maintains through systematic exclusion of challenges to authority. Maybe she borrowed it to save face, Richard suggests desperately, his voice revealing panic that plan for humiliation might backfire if Amara's circumstances differed from scenarios that revenge had constructed around assumptions about her complete defeat following abandonment that was supposed to prove superiority of privileged choices over authentic relationships. Or rented it for the day, Victoria adds, her tone carrying hope that external appearances might disguise internal reality of poverty that justice required if social hierarchy were to be validated through consequences that challenge boundaries would inevitably face when power demonstrated its capacity for revenge against those who dared to dream beyond designated limitations. The driver, a professional chauffeur in immaculate uniform, opens rear door with ceremony that contradicts every expectation about Amara's current circumstances, his respectful attention suggesting employer rather than charity case, whose presence would require different response that poverty might demand from service industry, trained to recognize wealth through signals that authentic prosperity provides. This is impossible, Richard mutters, his confidence cracking as scenario unfolds differently than scripted revenge had anticipated when humiliation depends on victims' cooperation in accepting designated role that power assigns rather than writing different story that character creates through determination that adversity teaches when survival becomes foundation for triumph. Three small figures emerge from vehicle's interior. Identical triplets whose coordinated appearance creates gasp throughout cathedral as guests process implications of children whose existence have been unknown to social circle, that gossip typically keeps informed about developments in lives that interest provides when entertainment value justifies attention to other circumstances. She has children, someone whispers with amazement. The observation carrying surprise that life had continued beyond divorce that was supposed to end story rather than beginning new chapter that independence could write when freedom serves creativity rather than just escape from circumstances that constraint had created. Triplets corrects another voice with awe that multiple births inspire when nature demonstrates capacity for abundance that human planning rarely achieves with such precision. Their identical features, suggesting genetic lottery, that privilege cannot purchase despite resources that attempt to control outcomes through methods that chance renders meaningless. They're beautiful, admits Caroline reluctantly, her aesthetic judgment overriding social prejudice momentarily as children's appearance commands recognition that breeding cannot guarantee, but nature provides randomly regardless of economic circumstances that wealth might prefer, determining through influence that money attempts to exercise over biological processes. And they're dressed. Victoria begins, then stops as clothing becomes visible. Each child wearing elegant red ensemble that designer quality makes unmistakable, their coordination suggesting professional styling rather than discount store necessities that financial struggle would require when resources dictate appearance rather than choice determining presentation. Like royalty, Eleanor finishes unwillingly, her words acknowledging quality that privilege recognizes despite prejudice that would prefer different assessment when evidence contradicts comfortable assumptions about consequences that should follow challenges to social boundaries that tradition maintains through systematic exclusion of people whose success threatens established order. The triplets move with confidence that security provides when childhood develops in environments where love creates foundation that stability builds upon, their bearing suggesting upbringing that prosperity enables rather than struggle that poverty creates when circumstances determine personality development through limitation rather than opportunity. Where did she get the money for? Richard begins, then trails off as implications become clear that divorce settlement had not achieved intended result of financial destruction. That woman he had abandoned had somehow discovered resources that independence could access when determination meets opportunity through channels that his knowledge had never explored. "Daddy, look, pretty lady in red dress," calls out one of the children with excitement that innocence provides when beauty creates joy rather than comparison. Their enthusiasm creating energy that authentic happiness generates regardless of social circumstances that adults might consider relevant to evaluation of worth. Amara herself emerges last from vehicle, her appearance creating silence that recognition produces when excellence meets expectation and confrontation that reveals how thoroughly prejudice had miscalculated outcomes, when assumptions about weakness encounter evidence of strength that adversity had developed rather than destroyed through testing that reveals character beneath surface appearances. "She's stunning," someone whispers involuntarily. The admission escaping before social training could suppress response that beauty commands regardless of racial prejudice, that education attempts to embed in consciousness that aesthetic appreciation overrides when excellence demands recognition despite barriers that bias might prefer maintaining. Her red dress, clearly designer original rather than imitation, fits perfectly, its elegance suggesting resources that success provides when achievement serves self-worth rather than just accumulating possessions. Her overall presentation commanding respect that competence earns when character meets opportunity through preparation that wisdom guides rather than chance creating randomly. Amara walks through cathedral doors with grace that confidence provides when self-worth derives from achievement rather than approval. Her 3 children flanking her like small ambassadors, whose presence transforms planned humiliation into celebration of life that continues beyond divorce, designed to end possibilities rather than creating new opportunities that independence could explore when freedom serves growth. "Good afternoon, Richard," she says calmly, her voice carrying neither anger nor submission, but dignity that character provides when strength meets challenge without requiring aggression to prove worth that accomplishment demonstrates through results rather than just claiming superiority that evidence must support. "Amara," Richard responds weakly, his planned script forgotten in face of reality that contradicts every assumption about her circumstances, every expectation about consequences that abandonment should have produced when social isolation was supposed to complete destruction that financial pressure had begun. "Congratulations on your wedding," she continues graciously, her words demonstrating class that breeding cannot teach, but character develops when wisdom guides response to cruelty with grace that rises above circumstances to maintain dignity despite treatment that lesser souls might allow to diminish their humanity. "These must be your children," Victoria observes, her tone mixing curiosity with confusion as she processes presence of triplets whose existence challenges narrative about Amara's complete defeat. That wedding invitation was designed to celebrate through public display of superior choices that privilege supposedly validates. "Yes, meet Marcus, Michael, and Maya," Amara introduces proudly, her children stepping forward with confidence that loving upbringing provides when security creates foundation for social interaction that fear never compromises, their names creating poetry that intentional choice suggests rather than random selection determining identity. "Hello," the triplets chorus in unison, their voices carrying joy that childhood maintains when environment nurtures rather than restricts development, their synchronized greeting demonstrating training that discipline creates when structure serves growth rather than just maintaining control through authority that love guides rather than fear maintaining. "They're remarkable," Eleanor admits reluctantly, her grandmother instincts overriding social prejudice momentarily, as children's presence commands positive response that authentic charm creates regardless of racial barriers that adult prejudice maintains when innocence meets bias that experience sometimes dissolves through direct contact. "Thank you," Amara responds simply, her acknowledgement carrying pride that motherhood earns when achievement includes successful parenting alongside professional accomplishment, her success measured by children's happiness rather than just external recognition that society might provide or withhold based on approval that authentic worth transcends. The cathedral guests observe this interaction with fascination that unexpected developments create when reality refuses to conform to comfortable scripts that prejudice had written about outcomes that should follow challenges to social boundaries. Their attention focused on drama that genuine surprise provides rather than staged entertainment. "Mommy, this place is beautiful." Maya exclaims with wonder that architecture inspires when grandeur meets young eyes that see beauty without cynicism. That adult experience sometimes develops when exposure to wealth becomes routine rather than remarkable occasion. That appreciation creates through fresh perspective. "It is beautiful, sweetheart." Amara agrees, her tone carrying appreciation for aesthetic excellence that education had taught her to recognize despite economic circumstances that might have prevented exposure to such environments when poverty limits access to cultural experiences that privilege provides automatically. "Are you going to sing at the wedding, Mommy?" Marcus asks hopefully, his question revealing knowledge about his mother's talents that hidden abilities sometimes possess when circumstances prevent full expression of gifts that opportunity might discover if recognition allowed development rather than systematic exclusion limiting potential. "Not today, baby. We're just here to wish Mr. Richard and Miss Victoria happiness in their marriage." Amara explains gently, her response demonstrating grace that rises above personal history to maintain civility despite treatment that lesser character might use to justify reciprocal cruelty when revenge becomes tempting option. "She sings?" Victoria inquires with surprise, her curiosity revealing lack of knowledge about woman whose replacement had been accomplished without understanding who was being eliminated when prejudice guided choice rather than wisdom evaluating actual worth that relationships might provide. "Amara has a beautiful voice," Richard admits reluctantly, his acknowledgement forced by direct question that denial would make obviously false when witnesses might remember performances that had occurred during marriage before social pressure destroyed what authentic connection had built between souls who had found harmony despite barriers. Among other talents, Amara adds quietly, her words suggesting depths that surface interaction rarely reveals when social circumstances prevent full expression of capabilities that proper environment might nurture if recognition allowed potential to flourish rather than systematic limitation constraining development through barriers that prejudice maintains. The conversation creates growing discomfort among guests whose expectations about entertainment had assumed different scenario than reality was providing, their planned satisfaction at witnessing humiliation transforming into confusion about narrative that refused to follow script that comfortable prejudice had written about consequences. "Well, you look," Richard begins, then struggles to complete sentence that honesty would require acknowledging beauty and success, while loyalty to current wife demands different response that diplomacy might attempt balancing when truth conflicts with social positioning that circumstances have created around choices that character must navigate carefully. "Healthy and happy," Amara supplies diplomatically, her assistance helping him avoid statement that might create problems with bride whose confidence depends on belief that previous marriage had been mistake corrected rather than valuable relationship destroyed through external pressure that wisdom should have resisted. "Mommy works with computers now," Michael announces proudly, his innocent revelation creating ripple of surprise throughout Cathedral as guests process information about career change that success suggests rather than desperation that assumptions about post-divorce circumstances had predicted when financial ruin was supposed to follow abandonment. "She has her own company," Maya adds with excitement that childhood feels when parents achieve recognition, her words creating further cognitive dissonance among observers whose expectations about consequences had not included entrepreneurial success that innovation could achieve when necessity meets opportunity through channels that privilege never explores. "We have big house with pool and gardens where we grow vegetables for dinner," Marcus contributes enthusiastically, his description painting picture of prosperity that contradicts every assumption about living circumstances that divorce settlement was designed to create when limitation rather than liberation was intended outcome. "Children often exaggerate," Victoria suggests diplomatically, her response revealing desire to maintain comfortable narrative despite evidence that challenges assumptions about results that abandonment should have produced when social isolation was supposed to complete destruction that financial pressure had initiated. Actually, they're quite accurate. Amara confirms calmly, her words carrying quiet confidence that achievement provides when success derives from effort rather than inheritance. Her accomplishment earned through merit rather than received through circumstances that birth determines when genetics attempts to predict capability. You started a technology company? Richard asks with disbelief that personal knowledge of her capabilities should have prevented if observation during marriage had recognized intelligence rather than just tolerating presence that social pressure would eventually eliminate when family loyalty demanded sacrifice of authentic relationship. Cybersecurity consulting, Amara explains simply, her specialization revealing market niche that expertise could dominate when knowledge meets opportunity through preparation that wisdom guides rather than chance creating randomly. Her success built on foundation that education had provided despite obstacles that systematic exclusion attempts creating. That's a very competitive field, Eleanor observes weakly, her comment revealing recognition that achievement in technology requires capability that prejudice had assumed lacking when skin color became proxy for competence evaluation rather than actual performance demonstrating worth. It is Amara agrees, but clients value results over assumptions, and security breaches don't discriminate based on the consultant's background when expertise provides solutions that ignorance cannot deliver despite credentials that privilege might prefer recognizing. Her explanation creates uncomfortable silence as implications penetrate consciousness that success had been achieved through merit rather than affirmative action, that comfortable prejudice preferred explaining minority achievement when actual competence challenged assumptions about natural hierarchy that genetics supposedly determined. How did you? Richard begins, then stops. His question reveals how thoroughly he had underestimated capabilities of woman he had abandoned when social pressure demanded choice between family approval and marriage that had provided happiness before external forces destroyed what love had built. Learn cybersecurity? My medical background included significant computer training for managing patient data and hospital systems. When circumstances changed, I expanded that knowledge into consulting that served businesses facing security challenges. Amara explains matter-of-factly, her transition story revealing adaptability that adversity teaches when survival requires innovation rather than just maintaining status quo. And it's successful. Victoria asks with barely concealed disbelief that woman she had replaced could have achieved financial independence that made wedding invitation ineffective as humiliation tool when prosperity provided dignity that poverty was supposed to eliminate. Forbes featured us as one of the fastest-growing cybersecurity firms last month. Amara responds casually, her achievement creating stunned silence among guests whose understanding of success had not included possibility that abandoned ex-wife could excel beyond their accomplishments. We got to meet the magazine people. Maya adds excitedly, her enthusiasm revealing family involvement in professional recognition that achievement had earned through merit rather than connections that privilege typically provides when success depends on networking rather than competence demonstrating worth. They took our pictures for the article about Mommy's company. Marcus explains proudly, his words suggesting media attention that real accomplishment attracts when innovation provides solutions that markets value regardless of entrepreneurs' background when expertise delivers results. The triplets' pride in their mother's success creates touching display of family unity that observers cannot ignore despite racial prejudice that would prefer different dynamic when assumptions about dysfunction meet evidence of harmony that love creates when authentic relationship guides household operation. Mommy teaches other people how to protect their computer secrets from bad guys who try to steal them. Michael contributes helpfully, his simplified explanation revealing understanding that children develop when parents share professional enthusiasm rather than hiding work that shame might suggest when circumstances create pride rather than embarrassment. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Eleanor responds automatically, her grandmother instincts engaging despite social conditioning, as children's innocence penetrates barriers that adult prejudice maintains. When innocence meets bias, that experience sometimes dissolves through direct contact with humanity that recognition reveals. She's very smart and works very hard. Maya declares with loyalty that childhood provides when family bonds create security. Her defense unnecessary, but touching in context where mother's worth was being evaluated by people whose approval had once mattered but no longer determined value. The ceremony proceeds with surreal quality as planned humiliation transforms into inadvertent celebration of success that authentic achievement creates when merit overcomes prejudice through demonstration of capability. That excellence provides regardless of social barriers that systematic exclusion attempts maintaining when power meets competence that refuse to accept designated limitations. I should go, Amara announces gracefully as reception begins, her timing perfect for maintaining dignity while avoiding extended interaction that might create discomfort for bride whose confidence depends on belief that replacement had been upgrade rather than lateral movement between women of different backgrounds but equal worth. So soon, Eleanor asks with surprise that genuine disappointment creates, her grandmother instincts having been engaged by triplets whose charm had penetrated social barriers that adult prejudice maintains. When innocence meets bias, that experience dissolves through authentic human connection. We have dinner plans with friends, Amara explains, her social life apparently thriving in ways that isolation was supposed to prevent when abandonment intended to create loneliness rather than liberation that independence could provide when support systems develop through character rather than just proximity. Thank you for coming, Richard says awkwardly, his gratitude confused mixture of social obligation and growing recognition that invitation had backfired spectacularly when humiliation transformed into demonstration of growth that divorce had enabled rather than prevented. Thank you for the invitation, Amara responds graciously, her words carrying no irony despite cruel intention. That gesture had represented when revenge motivated inclusion rather than genuine desire for celebration that authentic goodwill would have inspired. Boys and girls, say goodbye to Mr. Richard and Miss Victoria. She instructs her children, whose proper manners reflect upbringing that success enables when resources serve education rather than just accumulating possessions that status might require for appearance maintenance. Goodbye. Congratulations on your wedding. The triplets chorus politely, their synchronized farewell, creating moment of pure innocence that melts resistance even prejudice had constructed around assumptions about appropriate social interaction. When children demonstrate character that environment nurtures. They're lovely children, Victoria admits reluctantly, her aesthetic judgment overriding social conditioning momentarily, as children's natural charm commands recognition regardless of racial prejudice that adult training attempts embedding in consciousness that innocence temporarily penetrates. Thank you. They're my greatest achievement. Amara responds with maternal pride that transcends professional accomplishment to embrace human creation that love makes possible when nurturing guides development rather than just providing material necessities that wealth can supply without emotional investment. As they prepare to leave, Maya tugs on her mother's dress and whispers loudly enough for others to hear. Mommy, why did that man look so surprised when he saw us? Did he think we wouldn't look pretty? The innocent question creates uncomfortable silence as child's perception cuts through adult sophistication to identify emotional truth that planned humiliation had attempted concealing when cruelty disguised itself as social necessity rather than revealing prejudice that character should reject. Some people make assumptions, sweetheart, but what matters is how we see ourselves and how we treat others. Amara explains gently, her response providing wisdom without bitterness when teaching moments arise from circumstances that wisdom can transform into education rather than just enduring experiences that negativity might create. We're beautiful and smart and kind. Marcus declares with confidence that loving upbringing provides when children develop security through consistent affirmation rather than conditional approval that achievement might demand when self-worth depends on external validation. Yes, you are, Richard finds himself saying, his words escaping before social training could suppress response that truth commands when innocence meets recognition despite barriers that prejudice maintains around appropriate interaction with people whose presence challenges comfortable assumptions. "Thank you, Mr. Richard." Maya responds with courtesy that formal training had taught, her manners impeccable despite circumstances that might have excused less gracious behavior when children learn respect through example rather than just instruction. The final image remains etched in guest consciousness as Rolls-Royce carries family away from cathedral, where humiliation had been intended, but triumph achieved instead, when character meets challenge through dignity that reveals strength rather than weakness, when adversity becomes opportunity for growth. 2 hours later, as reception continues with conversations dominated by speculation about unexpected developments, wedding celebration becomes secondary to analysis of encounter that had challenged every assumption about consequences that should follow challenges to social boundaries. "She's extraordinary," Eleanor admits to her bridge club, her words carrying respect that observation had forced despite prejudice that comfort would have preferred maintaining when evidence contradicts assumptions about capability and worth. "Those children are absolutely delightful," Victoria confesses privately to her maid of honor, her acknowledgement revealing capacity for fairness despite competitive circumstances that might have prevented recognition of excellence when comparison creates discomfort. Richard stares out reception hall windows toward street where Rolls-Royce had disappeared, his thoughts consumed by recognition that abandoning Amara had been greatest mistake of his life, when love had been sacrificed for approval that provided no satisfaction comparable to authentic relationship that character had created before external pressure destroyed what wisdom should have protected through courage that conviction demands when testing reveals true values. 6 months later, Forbes publishes follow-up article about Amara's company expansion into international markets. Her success story inspiring other entrepreneurs while creating talking point in social circles where her wedding appearance had shattered comfortable assumptions about consequences that divorce was supposed to produce when systematic exclusion meets determination that transcends barriers through excellence that recognition cannot deny despite prejudice that would prefer different outcomes. If this story moved you, maybe it's time to examine assumptions about who deserves success, what determines worth, and how quickly circumstances can change when determination meets opportunity through character that adversity strengthens rather than weakens, when souls choose growth over bitterness despite treatment that would justify resentment, but wisdom transforms into motivation for achievement that silence critics through results rather than just arguments.